Vegas, who's given us a good presentation. Show your story, don't tell it. A little help that we can all use.
Yeah. Hi, how you guys doing? So I'm teaching craft of writing, not craft of business. So I noticed that this is a craft of business class, and half of you are gone now. So it's all good. My name is Maxwell Alexander Drake. I go by Drake. I'm a full-time writer. I've been writing for quite a long time. I've won awards as a novelist. I was a lead fiction writer for a massive game from Sony. I've written for other IPs. Got a TV series that I'm currently working on right now. The pilot has been greenlit. Don't applaud it because it hasn't sold yet. I've done movies, I've done comics, I've done musicals. I've written, and then for the last decade, I've taught writing. I have a website that we've launched this year, although it's not officially launched until January. But it's drakeu.com. I also have books on creative writing. You can find them. I have some here, or you can find them on Amazon or whatever. So they wanted me to do this one class. It usually takes me an hour to do this class. I've got 37 minutes, so I'm going to talk really, really fast and try to get through as much as I possibly can. So I start off all my classes with a disclaimer. First of all, know that these are my opinions. I'm not going to try to tell you how to write. I'm going to give you some advice. The advice is awesome. I'm always right. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that I'm always right. Because I am a very opinionated person. But you're adult, so you need to use your adult brain to figure out whether what I say is going to work for you or not. So keep that in mind as we go through this. What I really try to do with my classes is just show that there's an alternate way of looking at things. I'm very craft focused as a writer. I do believe that you should spend tons of time learning the craft. And I know that's something that is a mixed bag in some genres. But I'm very focused on the craft, and I do spend a lot of time learning, and I have spent a lot of time learning it. And what I've found as I've been teaching over the last decade is that a lot of aspiring writers might not exactly have everything that they need for this as a profession. Not a lot of aspiring writers today have MFAs in creative writing. Not a lot of aspiring writers today have a master's degree in English. And that's fine. I don't have either of those either. But I do have all the knowledge that I would have gained had I gone to college and paid for one of those degrees. And I do believe wholeheartedly that you do need that knowledge. And so what I try to do in these classes is kind of peel back the fog of war, show you things that you might not have heard of before, show you things you might not have seen before. And I do it in a really snarky kind of blue-collar way. One of my favorite reviews on my books on creative writing says, if Deadpool wrote a book on creative writing, it would be these books. So I don't teach writing like most academics teach writing. It's very layman, it's very blue-collar, a lot of jokes thrown in. But that's really what I try to do with these. I just try to show you things that you might not have heard before, things you might not have seen before. So hopefully we'll be able to get through as much as we can. And last, I do make things up for a living. So if I say something that pisses you off, just remember, I make stuff up for a living, so you probably shouldn't get pissed off. All right. So again, I mentioned my books. These are the first two creative writing books that are out. Both are running 4.9 out of 5 stars. Both are available on Amazon. I do have some with me. Also, again, the DrakeU website isn't officially launching until January, but anyone who signs up this weekend, I am giving away a free consultation with me. So it's a $200 value. If you want to sit down with me and talk to me about whatever, you can send me your writing. I can tell you my opinions on it, or business, or whatever. So if you sign up at drake.com or drakeu.com, you will be automatically entered to win that free consultation. All right, I start off all my class with a quote. This one's from Anton Chekhov. Don't tell me the moon is shining, show me the glint of light on broken glass. And I love this quote. First of all, it really does pertain to being a showy writer, not a telly writer. But really, I love this quote because Anton died in 1904. I've got this weird image in my head that there were a bunch of cavemen sitting around a fire a million years ago, and one of them's like, I'll write that story you tell about saber-tooth attack. But you very telling, you need to be more showy. Readers have been vigilant writers to stop telling since writing began. And the funny thing is, this is one of the first classes I created over a decade ago, and I created it back in the day when I would travel around. I wasn't as busy as I am now, and I would tell people, if you got a couple pages, send it to me, and I'll give you my opinions on it. I still do that, you just have to pay me for that. But back then, I just did it. And I would have people send me stuff, and I would read it, and bar none, the number one critique that I gave people, even to this day, is you're too telling. You need to be showy. And so I would give that critique, and they would go away, and they would rewrite, and they would send it back to me or whatever, and I would look at it, and I would go, I can see that you're using a bunch of different words, but you're still incredibly telling. And they would go, oh, that's right, you said that. And then they would run away, and they would rewrite, and they'd bring it back to me, and I would read it and go, you have no idea what I mean when I say be a showy writer, do you? And they're like, not a clue. And so I learned early on that this is something that a lot of writers struggle with, because it is difficult. It is an interesting, weird philosophy of thinking about how to use the English language to be showy in your writing as opposed to telling. So that's what this class is about. There's 11 points. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get to them all. We have 33 minutes left, so I will try to go as fast as I can to get through them. So first of all, let's look at what I feel showy versus a telling writer is. Speculative fiction should forge an emotional bond between the reader and what is being read. A great story can operate on a high intellectual level, but without drawing the reader in with something that speaks to them on a visceral level, the reader won't be moved by the greater ideas of the story. In other words, it's theme. And I teach theme, and I talk about the invisible layer. That first book is all about that. But let's focus in on this. So here's some definitions. To tell is a verb. It means to give an account of or narrative of, to narrate or relate. So for me, this is like watching a movie that has a voiceover, a narrative voiceover. So we see the cheetah's chasing after the gazelle, and there's some dude off screen that's like, the cheetah's very hungry. She hasn't eaten in like 3 days. If she doesn't make a kill, her baby will starve. And the reason why we have a narrator telling us that is, the cheetah can't tell us that stuff. Somebody has to tell us what this cheetah is feeling, experiencing, thinking, and so on and so forth. But he's telling us. That's the definition of tell. If we go to show is also a verb. It means to cause or allow to be seen. So this is like watching a movie or a play where the actor demonstrates something. So let's say Brad Pitt's one of my favorite actors. Let's say we get Brad Pitt in a movie. He's with a small child, and he's playing the father, and they're having this beautiful father-child day, and they're out in the city, and they're going to museums, they're doing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden the child trips and falls in the street, and a bus runs its head over. I mean, literally the head pops, and the child is dead. And so Brad runs out, and he scoops up the remains, and he's just crying, and he's screaming. And if you saw the end of the movie 7, where he does that massively brilliant performance, just think that. Like, that's what he does. We don't need some dude to step on screen and go, hey, by the way, this dad, he's very sad that his child is dead. We don't need that, because Brad Pitt's going to show us that pain, that anguish, that remorse that he's feeling. But I just cheated, because I'm talking about movies. And movies are visual, so they get to have actors do this stuff. We are prose writers. We get words, and that's it. But it doesn't make a difference. You have to do the same thing. You have to accomplish the same thing, but without an actor. So how do we do that? And that's what I have here. For me, the basic difference between telling and showing is that with telling, the writer is merely cataloging actions, feelings, emotions, and events. This is literally the most brilliant thing I have ever written in my entire career, so I'm going to read it twice. The basic difference between telling and showing is that with telling, the writer is merely cataloging actions, feelings, emotions, and events. Showing paints an image that allows the reader's imagination to create a scene and place the reader in the middle of it. So, let's look at 11 things. Thinking point number 1, use stronger verbs. While verbs are not the way to show in your story, they are vitally important. And I start here because a lot of aspiring writers do not understand the value and the importance of verbs. Verbs are the strongest, most important word in every sentence that you write in creative fiction. Every verb I write, I stress over and strain over and worry over and spend days thinking about. Verbs are it. They're everything to a creative writer. And here's what I mean by that. I could write Drake hit the wall. You see that, right? You can see me hitting the wall. Drake hit the wall. But I could also write Drake struck the wall. Do you see the same image in your head? Or has it changed? What about Drake whacked the wall? Or Drake bashed the wall? Does the image start to morph in your mind with every single change of the verb? Absolutely. Because that's the power of verbs in the English language. Now, don't be a thesaurus. Don't write Drake percussed the wall, because while this is grammatically correct, if I read this in your book, we're done. End of story. You have broken the contract. So if we wrote Drake put his gun in his holster, turned and walked from the room, you can see that. Change 2 words. Drake slammed his gun in his holster, turned and stormed from the room. Pay attention to your verbs. Everything about being a showy writer is built off of the strength of your verb choices. So it doesn't make you a showy writer, but it definitely is the first step. Think of point 2. Let the reader feel it. Don't tell the reader what to feel. Emotions are the fertile ground in which to sow the show. Unfortunately, it is easy to slip into telling. Emotions are the way to the reader's heart. If you can immerse the reader into what your narrator is experiencing, your job as an author is half done. So let's look at that. We don't want to tell our readers what the characters in our stories are feeling. We want to show it to them. Let them experience their emotions for themselves. And this is where it really takes a shift in your thinking as a writer, because you actually have to think different to put this type of words down on paper, or these type of words down on paper. So let's say we had a sentence, the monster jumped from the bushes and Drake was scared. That's a tell. And I teach tells or in a way that basically says if you can turn your words into a math equation, you're telling. So in other words, Drake equals scared. It's a math equation. It's a tell. So now I talked about verbs. Was is a verb. It's a linking verb in this sentence. So we'll talk about that in a second. But remember, verbs are important. Scared is a weak verb. There's nothing strong about the word scared. If we wanted to improve this sentence, we could do so by just replacing scared with terrified, because terrified is a much stronger verb than scared. So that helps. But that was needs to go too. So we could go, well, I'll just make it felt, because felt is a stronger linking verb than was, absolutely. But Drake felt terrified is still a math equation. Drake equals terrified. Math. We don't want that. We're writers. We're not mathematicians. To turn this into a show, we have to rethink what we're writing. What we have to do is ask ourselves, what does it look like or feel like to feel terrified? And then the answer to that question is what you write, because that's the show. That's what we're doing. So an example would be, the monster jumped from the bushes, terror washed over Drake, draining the blood from his face. Because what happens when somebody's blood drains from their face? They're excited, they're happy. No, they're afraid. Now to me, this is overwriting. I would never write this, because there's no reason to have the terror washed over Drake. Just too many words. So really, I would just write the blood drain from Drake's face. Done. I'm showing you terror as opposed to telling you that Drake is afraid. It's that simple. It's a change in the way you think, but it is that simple to start using emotions in a much better way. And terror, I mean, there's so many ways to tell terror. I struggle for breath, Drake struggled for breath, my eyes bulged, Drake's eyes bulged, tremors wrecked my body, the sensations the needle ran on my arm, Drake's throat clamped shut, the scream ripped from my lips, Drake's palms felt clammy, I backed away, escape being the only thought in my head. I mean, I just made this up as literally when I wrote this class, I just wrote this stuff. And there's a million other ways to describe terror. Part of the job description of a creative writer is creativity. It's in the title. It's like killer whale. I don't know why it killed me. Well, killer is in its title. So creativity is in the title of a creative writer. Push yourself. It's work. It is what you're going to have to think about. It is the time that you're going to spend trying to figure out how to become a showy writer versus a telly writer. But once you get it, you'll just write that way. I don't write in a telly fashion because I don't write that way. And I haven't in decades, because I'm a telly immersive writer. So it does take time to think about that. Avoid bland linking verbs. Was, were, has, had, are, is, feel, felt. The monster was coming toward me, and I felt terrified. I had but one chance, the cliff, though I knew I was not fast enough. There was simply too much ground between me and safety. I've read this same line in a billion different books. It's all tell. Every bit of it. If I'm going to show, I'm going to get rid of these bland linking verbs. The monster stepped closer, my entire body shook, and I could not breathe. My mind raced as my eyes darted around. There, the cliff. A sliver of hope I could grasp, but could I outrun this nightmare? Now I'm showing you my emotion as opposed to just telling you what's going on in the story. It's a complete different, it's a 180-degree turn in how you think as a writer. if you're going to be a showy writer, if you're going to write books that people will want to read. By the way, I heard some statistics thrown around in my own personal fiction, and I do run high as a epic fantasy writer, but I average a 96% read rate on the next book in any of my series. 96% of the people who buy one of my books always buy the next. And one of the secrets of that is I'm a very showy writer. So, thinking point 3, avoid filtering. Filtering is the worst thing you can do to your story. And it rots it silently from the inside. Most aspiring writers have never even heard of this term, but it is the number one thing that will kill most stories. So, what I mean by filtering. Filtering has to do with what you want the reader to focus on. And that comes down to understanding why we construct our sentences the way we do. So I could write the line, I could feel the demon's hot breath licking the back of my neck. But let's go back to 3rd grade, Miss Johnson's class. What's the subject of this sentence? I. What's the verb, the action? Could feel. Is that what I want the reader? Is that the important thing about the sentence? Is that the cool thing about this sentence? Am I the cool thing that I want the reader to focus on, and my feeling something? Is that the important thing? No. It's worthless. It has nothing to do with what I want the reader to feel. I am filtering the story through the narrator. That's why it's called filtering. I am forcing the reader to view the story through the POV. If I'm going to take that out, the demon's hot breath licked the back of my neck. How much more powerful is that? What's the subject now? The demon's hot breath. What's the action? Licking my neck. Is that what I want my readers to focus on? Hell yeah. Because that's terrifying. Me, I'm not all that terrifying. And what I'm feeling at the current moment is not all that interesting. So we don't want to filter. Filter will kill your story. And aspiring writers especially are really bad with this one. This is my number one pet peeve when I'm helping other people out. So avoid filter words. Could, can, decides, decide, or decided. I won't read the present tense. Experienced, felt, heard, looked, noticed, noted, realized, saw. The list goes on and on and on. These are all filter words. Basically, if you are forcing the reader to view your story through the character, then they're not focusing on the right thing. You want them focusing on what they need to focus on. So, Drake wondered what it would feel like to fall to his death. Well, now I'm forcing you to look at me wondering about something. That's not very exciting. Drake's imagination ran wild, the wind rushing past him, whipping his clothing into a tangled frenzy, the sight of the ground racing up to meet him, its sole desire to crush every bone in his body, the terror and ecstasy of his last few breaths of life. Oh, now I can wonder with him what it feels like to fall to my death. Also, bonus, Drake is batshit crazy. And if that's the type of character I'm writing, that's awesome, because I'm showing you the character of this character while I'm also showing you what it feels like to wonder about falling to your death. So I don't want to watch I watched the ghost float down the hall toward me. I want to write the ghost floated down the hall toward me. I don't want to write Drake looked at the policeman who had his gun pointed at him. I want to write the policeman had his gun pointed at Drake. I don't want to write I heard the monster's claws ripping up the ground as it gave chase. I want to write the monster's claws ripped up the ground as it gave chase. It's very simple. Drake could feel the knife slicing into his arm. The knife sliced into Drake's arm. These are more powerful ways of writing these sentences. So, these are just more examples on the scale. Again, trying to get there. However, sometimes you want to use filtering. I'm sorry, Drake, but we just can't be together any longer, Dylan said as he stood. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I watched as Dylan slowly walked away, my heart aching. So, I'm filtering here. I watched as Dylan, but what do I want the reader to focus on? Do I want the reader to focus on Dylan walking away from me? Or do I want the reader to focus on me with my broken heart? It's about understanding what you want the reader to focus on and then forcing that reader to focus on what you want them to focus on. It's called writing. It's what we do. So, it's okay. Also notice there's an adverb in here. I'm going to talk about adverbs in a very negative way in a moment. But remember, there's an adverb in this example, so we'll come back to that. Thinking point 4. Write in active voice, not passive. If you're a British author, I don't know how these people took over the world, but you're allowed to write 20% passive voice. If you're an American author, you're allowed to write less than 2% passive voice. So, I'm an American author. I'm going to write no passive voice. So this can be a tricky topic to master, but it is not tricky to understand. I mean, look, here's the English academic definition. It's so easy to understand. In an active voice sentence, the subject is doing the action. In a passive voice sentence, the target of the action gets promoted to the subject position. Like, it doesn't get more easy to understand than that, right? That's why I hate English. Because English is stupid. But let's break it down, because it's actually not that hard. Let's go back to 3rd grade. Miss Johnson, the dog bit the boy. What's the subject? And again, I'm just going to do this for you because I only have 18 minutes. The dog is the subject. What's the action? Bit. So it is an active voice sentence because the dog is our subject and the dog is doing the action. The dog bit the boy. If we switch that around, the boy was bitten by the dog. Now the boy is the subject of the sentence and was bitten is the action. But what did the boy do? Nothing. Passive. The subject is passive. We don't want that in speculative fiction. Literally, I write less than 0.2% passive voice. Not 2%, but 0.2. And the reason for this is, the only time I write passive voice as a fiction author is when I do not want the reader to get a piece of information. If I don't want the reader to know who bit the boy, I will write the complete sentence, the boy was bitten. But who bit the boy? A dog, a spider, his sister? I don't know. And neither do you, Mr. Reader, that I'm not going to give that information to because I don't want to. So every passive voice sentence I write is on purpose. I never write a passive voice sentence that doesn't go there for that reason. There's no reason for it. Active voice sentences are less word count. I get every contract that I get in. I'm a hybrid author, by the way. Most of my fiction is traditionally, actually all my fiction is traditionally published. I only self-publish nonfiction. The contracts that I get in are always word count limited. And I only get paid for so many words. Like I'm doing a novella for Shadowrun right now. They're paying me for 20,000 words. It's probably going to be a 22,000, 23,000 word story because that's usually what I hit in my novellas. But those extra 2,000 or 3,000 words, I'm giving them for free. And I don't like giving away crap for free. It's too hard what I do. So I like to get paid for everything. Writing in passive voice means I'm going to write more words. I don't want that. I need to be tight. I need to be concise. When back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, writers got paid by the word. We don't get paid by the word anymore. That's not the way the industry works. You get paid by the finished product. So same thing with indie writers. You only get paid by the finished product. You don't get paid by the word. So why waste those words in passive voice sentences? Again, just more examples. Thinking point 5, don't tell the reader how to react. An easy way to grasp if you're telling instead of showing is by looking at the words you are using. Do the words tell the reader how they should react to an event? If so, you're telling. In other words, then, in a totally unexpected move, the monster jumped at Drake. Every time I read this, and it's a little long, but when I'm reading a book, I always substitute words like totally unexpected with this. I always read, then, I'm a terrible writer and don't know how to do my job, so you do it for me, Mr. Reader. The monster jumped at Drake. I know it's a lot of words to add to a book, but that's what I do. But that's your job as a writer. Don't tell me that I'm going to imagine that it was unexpected. Your job is to show me that it was unexpected. So an example of that, a bad example, I need to change this one day. I read this like a decade ago. Drake took another step back, and again the monster did not move. Letting out a shuddered breath, he forced himself to calm down. I just need to keep moving away and I'll be fine, he thought. Shock stabbed into him as the creature lunged, claws bared. Now you're showing the unexpectedness as opposed to just telling the reader to do your job for you. Don't tell the reader how to react. So words like unexpectedly, suddenly, abruptly, out of the blue, without warning, surprisingly, and there's just all sorts of words that it just goes on and on and on. Thinking point 6, let the reader see it, don't make them guess. Showing is also about eliminating ambiguity and vagueness within your narrative. A writer needs to paint a picture. If you assume the reader knows what you mean, you make an ass out of you and me, as the old saying goes. So in other words, I could write, there was an old shack sitting in the backyard. And everybody can see that because everybody has seen an old shack sitting in the backyard. But do you think you see the same old shack as me? No, there's no way. Because we're all thinking different things. We all grew up in different parts of the country. An old shack is different for all of us. So a part of showing is to paint that picture. So I might write, an old shack slumped in the backyard like a broken weed, its pale white paint faded and flaking. The door hung limp on its hinges, swinging in the gentle breeze. Now you can start to see a little closer to what I see. Now I'm painting you a picture and doing my job as a writer, which is delivering a story that you're just going to read and imagine and be able to watch a movie in your head. Think of point 7, make it personal. One of the hardest concepts to grasp about being a showy writer is that you must make everything in your narrative personal to the POV. Remember, if you are writing in first-person POV or third-person limited, which are the two most common narrative forms for speculative fiction, then it is your character who is telling the story, not you. So everything should be personal to that character. Exposition is what separates prose from other mediums. I've heard this time and again from different writers groups that I've visited or whatever. For some reason, there's been this weird thing where aspiring writers have gotten into this misunderstanding that to be a showy writer means you can only write what a camera could see. I work in Hollywood. I write movie scripts. In a movie script, you can only write what a camera can see. Because if you write anything more than that, nobody's going to buy it. They really, literally will ignore buying your product if you describe a bunch of stuff. Because that's the director's job, the camera guy's job, the actor's job. There's 100 other people that are going to do that. So we don't, as a scriptwriter, we don't write anything in movie scripts other than dialogue. That's it. We don't describe anything unless it's a specific plot device that has to happen, like a business card falls on the floor and it says blah, blah, blah. We're going to write that in the script. Other than that, we're not writing anything. But we also get to cheat because the actor is going to do a lot of that for us. The director is going to do a lot for us. The camera angles are going to do a lot of that for us. As a prose writer, what separates prose from all other medium is exposition. It is being inside of those characters' heads. That is an amazingly powerful tool for a prose writer that no other mediums have. Like I said, I also write comic books. It doesn't exist in comic books either. Only in prose are you allowed inside that character's head. Don't shy away from that. So, how much time do we have? All right, I'm going to read a couple little things from a couple things of mine that were published just to kind of demonstrate both in first and third. It was chilly even though it was August, and the street was deserted even though it was about 3 in the afternoon. Across the road from me sat Jack's Cafe, an ancient rust-covered brick building with a stained red and white striped awning and an eerie wooden statue sitting beside its front door. What the hell was that thing even supposed to be? An Indian, an old white man, a child molester? I really had no idea. Still, the window promised old-fashioned shakes and malts as well as awesome burgers and fries, and since I hadn't eaten a thing since early that morning, they had my full attention. Remember, everything that your character sees, feels, and experiences is personal to them. They're the one telling the story. So I could have described the statue, and I could have described it as it did, I could have described it as fate, its fate and pain or whatever, but this girl is seeing this statue. She's the one who has to decide how it makes her feel. So I'm giving a little insight into her character, as well as describing the world around her. You can do the same thing in third person. Have I sworn my allegiance to the just or simply the victorious? This question called Balaam Dre's mind as he passed his gaze over the imposing group assembled in a loose circle beneath the Temple of Wisdom. 10 in total, including himself and Tyle. Can the righteousness of our cause truly cleanse my soul of what I've done this day? He could not say. The bile resting in the back of his throat was less ambiguous. Soot and ash congealed in his sweat, conspiring to irritate the skin beneath his armor. It exasperated the dark cloud saturating his thoughts. Those in attendance stood around a central sending stone and spoke in hushed whispers, waiting. I hate waiting. Again, he's just standing there. He's a non-participant in this scene. But everything he sees is personal. Everything is according to him and his values and what he's struggling with. Obviously, he's struggling with the people he's working with. Obviously, he's done something. We don't know what it is from this little excerpt. But he's done something that he's not proud of. All of this I'm giving to my readers by showing them everything being personal to my narrators, to my point of view character. Theme point 8, let your dialogue speak. Dialogue in a novel is not simply your character talking to each other. It can also be a way for the writer to show more of their story. It gives insight into characters. I do an entire set of classes on dialogue. Dialogue is one of the hardest things to master as a creative writer. But here is kind of how it relates to, or one thing that it relates to in showing. Because I see this time and again, and this is actually an excerpt from one of the very first things I ever book doctored like 10 years ago. And I've changed all the names, but Sally was a 20-year company woman. Drake knew she was frustrated, but he also knew she wouldn't roll over on their boss just for being an idiot. She had a conscience. Like I said, this is literally what somebody had written. And they wrote it, it's like chapter 4 or 5 of this book, and I know why they wrote it. Because Sally has never been introduced in this book before. And so the writer was like, oh crap, I've never told the reader anything about Sally, so I need to give them a bunch of info-dumped information so that they'll even know who this person is. But that's what it is an info dump. You're dumping a bunch of telly stuff on the reader that you can work in organically, especially dialogue, because this scene was an actual dialogue scene where Drake, and again, changed everything, but Drake and Sally sat down and had a talk. So at one point in their dialogue, I just changed it to include this. Once again, I had to cover for him as a boss, Sally sighed and plopped in the chair, but I couldn't let things go forward his way, Drake. You know what it cost the company millions. I just wish I could tell the board to not feel guilty about ruining his career. Every single bit of the information in this paragraph is in this paragraph. And normally I get interactive, but I've got 8 minutes. So it doesn't have the exact time she's been with the company, 24 years. But guess what? She's a tertiary character. This is the only chapter she's in, and she's never in the novel again. So I don't really care how many years she's worked for the company. But is she frustrated? Yeah, she's sighing and plopping. Does she have a conscience? She literally says she would feel guilty if she ruined her career. Has she been there for a long time? She can talk to the board of directors. A first-year secretary cannot talk to the board of directors directly. So maybe we don't know she's been there 24 years, but we can gather that she's been there quite a long time. So every piece of information in that crappy info dump tell, I can work in organically in a piece of dialogue that's already happened. There's already a conversation between these two people. So look for opportunities, because dialogue, one of the advantages of dialogue is it's a way more showy version of getting information to your reader than putting it into your narrative. Don't overdo it, because again, writing is a balancing act. So if you do everything as dialogue, then that will also hurt your story. Thinking point 9, let your reader hear it. Don't tell the reader what they hear. This goes back to emotions, but it's tied to dialogue. Speech tags can be useful tools for showing rather than telling your story. Unfortunately, most people use speech tags as tells. So in other words, let's go, Drake said anxiously. Drake equals anxiously. It's a math equation. We don't want that. If we are going to turn this into a show, again, we're going to have to rethink the way we're thinking about writing. What does it look like to say something anxiously? Well, let's go, Drake said, trying to glance in all directions at once. There's an idea. There's one way to do it. There's a million ways to do it. Be quiet, Drake screamed loudly. Well, first of all, there's only one way to scream. So using adverbs redundantly really ticks me off as a writer. I really hate seeing stuff like this. So we just don't need it. Be quiet, Drake screamed. But really, we don't even need that as a speech tag. We could literally just write be quiet with a big old exclamation point, and the reader, let's say they're in an argument and it's already been a lot of shouting, they're going to be able to infer that was screamed loudly. So we don't even need that stuff most of the time. So be careful with that. Thinking point 10, kill the adverbs. I hate adverbs. I really do. And I use probably one every page and a half in everything that I've ever had published. But the above example is another common mistake using adverbs. But adverbs are not just found in speech tags. Oh no, my friends, all writers, especially new ones, tend to radically overuse adverbs. Luckily, most adverbs are easily trimmed out of your lovingly constructed manuscript, because many adverbs are simply redundant. Yeah, there's a lot of adverbs in that. So we don't need them. Keeping low, Drake quickly raced to the other side of the room. How else can you race? Can you race slowly? So why use it? It's just redundant. This sentence is no weaker. Keeping low, Drake raced to the other side of the room. It's the same strength of sentence because we're using a strong verb. When the plane tilted sideways, Drake was thrown completely out the open door. Man, thank you for telling me that. I was afraid he left a leg in that plane. We don't need it. It doesn't need to be there. There's so much more emotion. Like we can write Drake walked slowly across the room. But if instead we wrote, dreading what he would find, Drake dragged his feet as he crossed the room. Now, the first way I'm like, okay, he's walking slowly across the room. The second way I'm like, holy crap, what's going on? Don't go across the room, dude. Like, I don't want to find out what's over there. So you're investing your reader into the moment, and that's cutting those adverbs. But remember, in the last example, a couple examples ago, Dylan slowly walked away. Because sometimes a door just slowly closes, and it can have massive impact. Adverbs are not the enemy. They're the enemy when you use one every paragraph, or one every sentence, or two every sentences. I use one every page, page and a half. Every page, page and a half, I've got an adverb. Because sometimes the door just slowly closes, and it's awesome. But you need to make sure you don't overuse them, because they are crappy telly words. That's just what they are. And then you can kill adjectives as well. I'm going to skip this because I've got 3 minutes. They're the same thing. It's all just more examples. And then the last thing is, it is okay to tell sometimes. Keep in mind, writing is a balancing act. A novel that is one big show might be the worst thing ever written. There are times when you absolutely need to tell. So let's say one character is telling another character about an event that the reader's already read. So in chapter 1, Drake gets attacked by this monster in the park, and he gets away. In chapter 2, he goes home and he talks to his wife. I do not want to watch the conversation where he's like, oh my God, I was walking through the park, and then this monster even looked like this. Like, I don't want to, I was there, dude. I was literally there with him. Like, don't tell it to me a second time in chapter 2. So just say, and then Drake told his wife about the monster attack. We're done. Move on. Or if the scene, and I see this time and time again, especially with pantsers. I'm a plotter. I do live in the plotting camp, but I teach both plotting and pantsing. You don't know what those terms are, come see me after this, I'll tell you. But if you're a pantser, somebody who's writing by the seat of their pants, this is where I see this all the time, where there's a scene that has no value to the story. In other words, it's 3,000 words of people going down to the train station and standing in line and buying train tickets, and then going and finding their train, and then finding where they're going to stash their luggage, and then getting onto the train, and then finding a seat, and then looking out the window as the trees go by, and thinking about the duck-billed platypus for a while, and then looking at the menu to figure out what they're going to order for dinner during this train, and nothing happens. And then they finally get to Chicago, and literally 3,000 words later, I'm bored out of my mind. Because nothing has happened. I mean, look at Harry Potter. That's one of the most famous stories with a train. We only took the train once. From there on out, we never even retook the train. We did other things to get to school. Because we don't repeat things as writers, especially in a series. You don't do the same thing over and over and over again. So, in those instances, just write, and then they took a train to Chicago. Because nothing happens, so don't force your readers to live through the boring moments. I have boring in my entire life. Your readers are going to work and sitting next to a boring guy at work, and then they're going out to dinner, and maybe they're on a boring date. They're reading your book for action and adventure. Don't drag them through a bunch of boring, mundane crap. Although that did remind me, I've got a minute left, I'm going to waste it, because I'm done. I actually taught a Japanese author. He was one of my students over the last decade. He writes in Japan, and he's very famous, and has got these massively successful books. And the genre that he writes in, business, or fictionalized business is what it's called. It is literally a novel about going to work and doing your job. I have one on my shelf. It's written in Japanese, so I can't read it. The only thing in English is in the back, because that's the front. It says, dedicated to Drake, who taught me so much. It's the only English in the whole book. But it's a genre about nothing. Literally, I asked him, and he's like, no, I'm like, does the building catch on fire? And he's like, no, that would be terrible. He does a great job. He gets an assignment, and he's got this big order to fill, and he goes out and figures out how to do it, and then he delivers to the customer on time. Oh my God. Anyway, that's it. That's me. Thank you very much. If you like my writing style or my teaching style, like I said, I do have some books. I'll be in the back. I have very limited supply. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them on drakeu.com. DrakeU will launch officially in January. There'll be tons of videos. There'll be probably when it launches in January, there'll be about 10 to 12 hours of videos, but eventually there'll be about 80 to 90 hours of me just spitting crap at you just like this. So if you like that, great. If I pissed you off, don't go there, because I will infuriate you.